Thank you, Casey, for that introduction. I hope I can live up to it. No, it's good to be back here with all of you. This is unfortunately my last event with all of you in this visit, heading down to Santa Cruz area, to SoCal, to Land of Medicine Buddha on Friday, where I'll do a weekend course there. And so, anyway, it's always wonderful to be back in the Bay Area because I used to live in San Francisco for about 18 years. So it's changed a lot since then. But all right, so tonight I understand is generally a period of meditation, and we're certainly going to do a fair amount of meditation. So those of you who came expecting to do some meditation know that that will be part of the program. What I thought I would do is kind of divide it into three parts, since we have kind of 3 half hours almost. We're into the first half hour a bit here, but we'll do maybe a shorter meditation this first period. I want to just talk a little bit and then do a meditation together. And then I'll talk a little bit more and then we'll do another meditation together. And then one more time talking and then a meditation, just to give you a little bit of instruction around what we're going to be doing in those and some context for how that plays a role in our Buddhist practice. And some of you may not be Buddhist, and that's perfectly fine. What I'll be working with is something you can use regardless of whether you're Buddhist or not. So we're going to start the whole idea behind tonight, as I read the description of this that Bay, very kindly put together, is really just to work with developing more peace and calm in the face of things that we are having to deal with. Certainly in our world right now, we have a lot of things that can disturb our minds. And in Buddhism, we're very much about trying to make the mind much more focused and calm and to not get so distracted by these things. The deeper work that Buddhism is all about is to remove all of those negative tendencies that we have completely, so we're never bothered by them again. But that's a goal, of course, for much later on in our practice. But what I thought we would start with tonight is simply the idea that oftentimes the breath is one of the most powerful tools to help us to just at least have some initial calm. This is maybe like the first line of defense, is that any time that we see ourselves sort of going astray, when we see maybe some anger arising or a mind that is jealous or greedy or whatever the case might be, these states of mind, that we reconnect with the breath. It's quite interesting. There's a great meditation teacher and practitioner named Alan Wallace, I think his center is down in Santa Barbara, but he's also got a number of meditation centers around the world now. And he's really been working a lot with Westerners in particular. All these traditions of Buddhism obviously come from the East, and there's a different culture there to some degree to support some of the practices, but he's been working primarily with Westerners, and he's found the breath to be one of the most powerful tools for us to work with, simply because it's something that we have all the time, right? We're breathing in, we're breathing out. It's nothing we have to fabricate or create, to think about. We're just simply going to bring awareness to the breath. And what he finds is that people are able to develop much deeper states of concentration in the West using the breath than they do with visualizations or all kinds of intricate thought processes and what have you. So I think with the discursive minds that we have in the West, it's really useful to use the breath as kind of, again, our beginning tool to find some calm, some peace in regard to whatever's going on. Particularly, I want to introduce you, if you haven't experienced this meditation before, to what's called the 9-round breathing meditation, because it's very much about tapping into breath, particularly with a kind of deeper awareness of what Tibetan Buddhism would call it sort of our psychic body. We have our sort of physical body, and then we have a psychic body. That psychic body is kind of at a deeper level in our awareness. And so what we do for this meditation is we're going to be doing, it's called 9-round breathing meditation because we do 3 rounds of 3 breaths, so a total of 9 breaths. And to begin with, we just do this very simple visualization. At least it's relatively simple compared to a lot of the visualizations in Tibetan Buddhism. We're going to visualize these channels. Channels in Tibetan Buddhism are sort of like pathways for energy. I'm sure most of you do yoga, or you've had treatments for like acupuncture where they work with qi. So in yoga, it's prana. In again, Tibetan or in Chinese medicine, it'll be qi. The idea is that we have energy flowing through these bodies. It's not something that's that evident, that we can't open up the body and see these little channels and what have you. They're pathways where energy flows. And energy, essentially in Buddhism, is wind, and wind is breath. So what we're doing is we're kind of visualizing these three channels. They're sort of like hollow tubes or straws. The first channel that we visualize, the central one, kind of starts at this point, the ajna, between the eyebrows. And it kind of is inside the body, just inside the skin here, and it goes up to the crown of the head, and then it descends down in front of your spine, and it goes down into your lower abdomen. So that's the first one that we visualize, the central channel, and we visualize that being blue in color. I hope I'm not making it too complicated, but this is, again, do the best that you can. If you can't get colors or anything, that's all right. Just think about, again, initially this central channel that is right in the middle going down to your lower abdomen. On either side are the right and left channels, and they start just inside your nostrils, and they go run parallel all the way down to the lower abdomen as well. The right one is red, the left one is white. So these two channels on either side are just slightly smaller. Just visualize them as being slightly smaller, sort of tubes or straws that are running parallel again to the central channel. What we're going to do is we're going to work on cleaning those channels out. And what it said is that those channels are related to three of our distorted states of mind. When we initially were going to do the first three breaths where we breathe in through the right, visualize that energy coming down into the lower abdomen. And then we're going to breathe out through the left, and it comes out all the way. And that removes all of our anger energy. So this is a powerful tool to use if you are having, some anger thoughts or other thoughts that are maybe disturbing that you want to be rid of. And so we're going to do that breathing in through the right and out through the left 3 times. Then we're going to breathe in through the left and out through the right 3 times. And it said when you breathe out through the right, you remove all that kind of attachment, greed, miserliness, all that kind of desirous energy that's maybe not so helpful for us, because it keeps us preoccupied in all of these external things that we think are bringing us pleasure, but are actually not doing that to the best, to the way that we would ideally like to have pleasure or happiness. So that's the second round of 3, in through the left, out through the right. And I'll guide you in this so you have an idea of what this all is, and then I'll let you do it on your own. The last one, we're going to breathe in through both the left and right. Feel that energy come down to our lower abdomen. And then the energy comes up through the central channel and exits when we exhale. And when you exhale, think that you're getting rid of all of the ignorance. Buddhism says that we are not aware of everything. We have pretty smart minds. We're pretty intelligent, but we don't have that deeper wisdom. And so we're all under the control of some form of ignorance. So we're going to get rid of any of that unknowing, any of that ignorance, any of that misknowing. All right, so again, it's a relatively simple in terms of what we're doing, but the visualization can be a little tricky. So again, I'll guide you in doing this. And maybe we'll just start with simply connecting with the breath for a few minutes, and then I'll lead you into this meditation. And then I'll let you do it again on your own after we've gone through 1 round of the 9-round breathing, the entire thing. And then you can do it again if you wish, or you can just simply meditate on the breath. Okay? Any questions before we start? I might mention that this does come to some extent from the tantric tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. That's why we're visualizing these kind of subtler aspects of our body, these psychic channels. But it's something, again, anyone can do. All right, so let's go ahead and just start with a few minutes of connecting with the breath. You might focus in on the point around the nostrils where you feel the air coming in and out. That might be helpful to kind of gear you up for this meditation. And by the way, when we get to where we're going to be breathing in through one and out through the other, you might find it useful to kind of close that nostril that you're not using at that time. And I'll give you, again, some direction on that. So I'll ring the bowl here to begin the meditation, and we'll just spend a few minutes in silence meditating on the breath before we do this 9-round breathing meditation. So before we begin this 9-round breathing meditation, let's just set a very good motivation for being here. We have the opportunity to come together in this special place on this evening in order to work on our minds through meditation and learning about meditation. So set an intention of being here to help define greater peace and calm in your mind, in your heart. And want this for yourself, but also think about those who you have a more positive effect upon by having a more peaceful mind. Think that you can be here for others as well. Those that are already in your life, as well as those that you will meet and encounter, to be able to be a peaceful presence in this world. So again, we start with the visualization, once more visualizing these 3 channels. First, the central channel, a little bit larger than the others. This hollow tube that starts at that point between the eyebrows. It curls up like an umbrella handle up to the crown of the head, and then descends straight down in front of the spine. It goes to a few finger widths below your navel. Just kind of visualize that blue central channel there, kind of a deep blue. But think of these channels as being kind of light, not hard substance, but kind of very luminescent. On the right-hand side, the right channel, a little bit smaller, again is red in color, and it starts just inside the right nostril. It runs parallel to the central channel, up to the crown of the head, descending down. It goes a little bit lower than the central channel, so it has the ability to fold into the central channel or the left channel. Just again, stabilize your visualization of that channel, the red right channel. And then on the other side, the left, starting at the point in the left nostrils, left nostril is the white left channel, and it ascends parallel to the central channel, to the crown of the head, and descends down, just like the right, curling a little into the central channel and the right channel. So again, those 2 side channels just slightly smaller, the central channel a little bit larger. And just stabilize your visualization of these. So again, we're going to do these 3 rounds of 3 breaths. It's sometimes hard in guiding it to time it for everyone. So if you find that you've already done it, then you can just simply breathe natural and then begin again when I give you the instruction. But I'll guide you through these 9 breaths. For the first one, we're going to breathe in through the right and out through the left. So you might bring your finger up and cover up the left nostril. And we're going to breathe deeply in, and then when we get ready to exhale, then you cover the right and breathe out through the left. And we'll do this 3 times, all right? So again, just feel the energy going up, coming all the way down to the abdomen, and then going out the other channel. So breathing in through the right. And breathing out through the left. Breathing out any anger, aversion, irritation, annoyance, letting that all go. Once again, covering the left, breathing in through the right. And then covering the right, breathing out through the left. Again, letting go of all that negative energy, all that anger, frustration. Again, covering the left, breathing in through the right. Drawing the energy down to the lower abdomen. Covering the right, breathing out through the left, exhaling completely. Sending out all that negative energy that just dissipates, disappears in the space in front of you. You can keep your finger where it is on the right nostril because in this next round, we're going to breathe in through the left and out through the right. So covering the left or the right, breathe in through the left. Covering the left, now breathe out through that red right channel, releasing all the attachment, desire, greed, miserliness. Covering the right, breathing in through the left, down to the lower abdomen. Covering the left, breathing out through the right. Once more, covering the right, breathing in through the left, drawing the energy all the way down, and then covering the left and breathing out through the right, letting go of all that attachment energy. When you've finished, you can drop your finger. You don't need that any longer. Because on the third round, we're going to breathe in through both the left and right. Bring the energy down to the lower abdomen and then visualize breathing through the central channel, breathing out all that ignorance energy. So we'll do this 3 times. Begin now, breathing in through both left and right. Breathing out through the central blue channel, releasing all ignorance, all unknowing, all confusion. Breathing in through both left and right. And breathing out through the central channel. And just releasing all of that ignorance. Breathing in once more through both. And breathing out through the central channel. Just pause for a moment. Just to check in and see what's going on with your mind, with your body. So again, we'll do another round of this, but I won't lead you in it. Instead, you'll do this on your own as best as you can. And don't worry if you get kind of mixed up, just do the best that you can. It's no problem. We'll once more start with the first 3, where we breathe in through the right, out through the left, letting go of anger. Breathe in through the left and out through the right for 3 breaths, letting go of our desire, attachment, that kind of energy. Then breathing in through both, out through the central channel, and releasing all that ignorance, unknowing, confusion, what have you. So then when you finish this, you're welcome to do it again if you'd like, or you can simply bring the awareness back to the breath and just focus on the breath. All right, so go ahead and proceed with that. Okay, so you can open your eyes gradually, and we'll just take a pause for a moment to come back into the space. So, are there any questions on the 9 round breathing meditation? Able to get all the steps right? It's not horribly complicated, but it's kind of like chewing gum and clapping your hands at the same time or something. I don't know. Something like that. Maybe not. Oh, yes, please. Sure, sure. What's your name? Chris. Thanks, Chris, for that question. Yeah. I mean, this is a big question in Buddhism, of course. Identifying that ignorance is really important. What the Buddha says essentially is that because we're not knowing things correctly, that's kind of the root problem that we have. We're not really understanding what is often the term that's often used is the nature of reality. Of course, when we look at our modern world and all the investigation that we have into the physical world, right, and how everything exists, we know from things like quantum physics, which I have really very little grasp of. Don't mistake me as an expert in any way. But we know that kind of what we are seeing is often not exactly how things are existing, right? That the fact that everything appears to be so solid, and yet they say if you take all the matter that's in a desk like this or something, it's like the size of that, and everything else is space. I mean, we have these ways of understanding in our world that things are quite different than the way they appear. Well, Buddhism is saying that we essentially have a way that things are appearing to us as if they had their own way of existing, kind of existing from their own side. We use that phrase often. It means that we think things kind of have their own identity. Like when I hold up these flowers, I'll hold them up so folks here online can see as well. We think that the flowerness of these exists out here on its own. And what the Buddha says is that essentially that's a mistaken idea based on a false appearance. It's not like we have no ground for that. We do have a false appearance. Things are appearing to have their own flowerness from their own side. But moreover, we're grasping at that as if it's real. And we invest in all of this kind of reality. And so we get attached to things like flowers and we get upset when they fade and wilt away and what have you. But the biggest misconception we have involves what we call the I or the self, the person that we hold on to so tightly. We're kind of making our way through the world, grasping at this sense of a really solid me that when we investigate, we find doesn't exist that way at all. And Buddhism teaches many techniques to kind of get in there and understand how the I and how all these other things really exist. Again, it's a much deeper teaching, but it's something that we kind of work our way up to and eventually engage in the teachings and meditations that help us to kind of dismantle this false way of thinking. I mean, I'll use an example that I use often and that the Buddha even used in many of his sutras, his discourses, which is that he used the idea that it's like in a dream. I don't know your dreams because I don't know your minds. I only know my own dreams, but I assume your dreams are like my dreams. I would assume we all, as human beings, have somewhat similar experiences. Maybe there are some of you who don't dream. I don't know. But in my dreams, I get so caught up in reality of the dream that I'll often have emotions arising on the basis of that, right? This is what happens when you have a nightmare, right? Or anything that kind of entices you or causes some change in your mind, is that you think that what you're experiencing is real, right? In the midst of the dream, you're kind of going through the emotions that would be arising on the basis of being chased by something or having something really tantalizing and beautiful and wonderful appearing and the kind of wanting to experience that and grasp at that. This is all based on a false idea, though, right? Because we know when we wake up from the dream that everything that we were holding on to in the dream doesn't exist that way at all. It existed as a dream object, but it didn't exist as an object in our everyday life, not something that we can actually taste and enjoy or experience or what have you. So the dream reality has a different way of existing if we investigate than the way it appears. Because when we are in the dream, we're totally caught up in it, right? Now, if you're a lucid dreamer and if you're able to bring that awareness into your dream, you have a very different experience, right? Because in your dreaming, then you are not being caught up in all of it because you're aware that you're dreaming, right? And you go, oh, that's just appearing to be a tiger rushing at me that I, would normally be afraid of, but I'm not afraid of it because I know it's just a dream appearance. I'm not saying it's identical to our waking reality, but it's an example of how we can have things appearing to our minds that we'll buy into and hold on to as if they're real, but they don't really have that reality. How things actually exist is an important point because it helps us from kind of moving to an extreme of thinking things don't exist at all. The Buddha never said you don't exist. You exist because you're sitting here listening to me go blah, 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 all right? That's part of what you're experiencing. You do exist. But how do you exist? You don't exist in that concrete, kind of independent way. You actually exist dependent upon many factors. The coarsest way is that you depend upon all the causes and conditions that have led you to be here. Causes and conditions can be as simple as the causes and conditions that led you to have this body, right? You had your parents, through the force of their cells uniting, the egg cell and the sperm cell, that united, that became your body. You had a continuity of that body all the way to this present moment, right? And that body will continue on very different cells now than it was when we were born or conceived. But essentially that continuity of a body is the only way that body exists in terms of those causes and conditions giving rise to it. If you didn't have those causes and conditions, you wouldn't have a body. Simply put, right? If we didn't have the causes and conditions for these are freesia, right? Freesia, yeah. So if we didn't have causes and conditions for these freesia, we wouldn't have them sitting in front of us, right? You need causes and conditions, such as the plant that they came from, which was, I guess, are there bulbs in this or seeds? Is this a bulb plant? I never knew. I'm not very good at botany either. Finding all my faults tonight. But there's the water, of course, the sunlight, all these various things. These are all different causes and conditions that give rise to these flowers. So that's one way that we can talk about things existing. They don't exist independently. They're part of a chain of interdependence, various factors. Thich Nhat Hanh, the great Vietnamese Zen master, he used this term interbeing. That nothing exists on its own. It doesn't be on its own. It's interbeing. It's being within a whole sphere of things. He said when you see something like a piece of paper, ideally you should see the rain that came down that watered the tree itself, the ground, that all the nutrients that gave rise to it, the sunlight that helped the tree to grow. All these various things are in that piece of paper. And infinite things are in that piece of paper in a sense, because it doesn't exist independent of all of that. Of course, things also have parts. So we can talk about, for example, with these flowers, that we have different parts of the flowers. Here, again, my lack of botany knowledge is going to fail me then. So we have all the little parts that exist in there. I guess there's pistils and stamens and things like that. I don't know what all. And then the petals and then, the stem and I don't know. Anyway, all of this stuff is part of creating what we call this flower. With our bodies, we have different parts of our bodies, right? We have the head and the torso and the arms and the legs. And of course, all of those have parts such as our hands, and the hands have parts such as our fingers and so on. Everything exists on a collection of parts. You don't have anything that's a whole without the parts being there. So that's another way that we can talk about things having a level of dependence. This whole kind of way of analyzing things is called dependent arising, all right? The subtlest way that things exist, though, the Buddha says, and this is a hard one for us to get, but it reassures that there is some level of existence that we can still posit when we pick all this apart, is that things exist on the basis of us designating them as such. In other words, going back to that idea of this ignorance, we think there's these flowers existing on their own, but they actually exist because that's what we call these. We give them that label. Give them the name for it, which are the words, but also just kind of the idea of it, a conceptualization of what these are, and that's how we relate to them. As human beings, we'll call these flowers and we'll put them on, the table here and enjoy them and what have you. But that's how flowers exist in the end, is there's nothing more than a base, this collection of stuff that we're calling flowers, calling freesia. There's nothing more than that. So when it comes to the I, the person that we think of as so concrete and independent in this collection of stuff, it's really just a label. It's an idea we have about an I that's here. And there's no real I here. And that's another investigation you can do, is go looking for that real I. Where is this real I that feels so strong, especially, in some situations where we might be defending that I or really clinging tightly to it? Well, where is it then? Sometimes it feels kind of in the center of the chest here. Like if somebody threatens us, all of a sudden we're kind of like wanting to defend ourselves from that place. But if you were to kind of open up the chest here, you might have to anesthetize yourself first, but open up the chest and kind of looking for that real I. There's no the real I in there. It's not in there kind of going, hello, you found me. You know, there's no real I there. There's no real I in any part of the body. There's no real I in any part of the mind. The I is just an idea. The I is a concept that we have in relation to all of this. So again, why we focus in on the I is because that's where everything revolves around. Our attachment to beautiful flowers or our aversion and anger towards people who annoy us and what have you. All of those are playing off of this concrete sense of an I that doesn't exist that way at all. So that's kind of an introduction to it. I mean, this is a topic that people study for years and years and years and meditate on. It's alluding to this concept we call emptiness. And emptiness, when we use it in our colloquial language, kind of means a feeling of loneliness or nothing really happening, and we feel kind of But it's an idea of something being empty of something. What is the I empty of? Empty of existing in this false way. It doesn't exist independently. It exists dependently. So that's, again, just a little preview of that for you, Chris, as well as other folks here. But it's something, again, that is an important topic in Buddhism, because as I said, that's the root problem that we have. The Buddha thinks that we're all these we think of ourselves as these concrete objects, and we're like bumper cars that just keep bumping into each other all around in our daily lives. But that's all an illusion. And things have never existed that way. We think they do, and they appear that way, but that's not how they exist at all. So the job in Buddhism is to discern that, to really come to understand how things actually exist. And that dismantles the whole process, especially when we realize that through deep meditation. That's why we focus a lot on meditation, right? And to develop some concentration, some single-pointed mind, so that we can then know that at a very deep level. And then it'll be life-changing. Then we actually will have that wisdom, and we can live from that place of wisdom. Then we won't get tangled up with everybody else, because there's no I really as a target for all of that to hit. Because the I, as it exists in this way of a dependent arising, is very, very subtle. Lama Zopa Rinpoche, the spiritual director of our organization, who passed away just about 3 years ago now, he used to say, it's almost as if the I doesn't exist. Because it's very, very subtle. It's just an idea of an I. But that's good enough. That's good enough for the I to exist. It doesn't need to be more than that. Anyway, it's interesting stuff. It was kind of one of the first teachings that brought me into this tradition in particular, was looking at the approach. We have this amazing legacy of Lama Tsongkhapa. There must be Lama Tsongkhapa around here somewhere. Oh, Lama Tsongkhapa? Anyway. Lama Tsongkhapa lived in the late 14th, early 15th century, and he wrote extensively on how to realize this emptiness. So it's always taken by his teachings. So anyway, thank you for that question, Chris. Any other questions, or do you have more to ask about it, Chris? Or no, good enough for now. Okay. I hope I didn't confuse people more with that little bit, but I mean, and the thing is about emptiness, I'll go a little bit more on it, is that I find it really quite exciting, to know that there's this truth that we can realize and we can be free of all this nonsense, right? That's why the Buddha taught it, is out of his compassion. He saw that we're actually quite confused and creating our own suffering, essentially, creating our own misery, creating our own problems. So we can also uncreate that through realizing this truth. So. No other questions? Okay. So again, whatever level of ignorance, know that there's other forms of ignorance in Buddhism too. In Buddhism, we also adhere to the concept of karma, which is also taught in other Eastern traditions. But it's really central because, once more, karma is a causal factor. It's the causes and conditions that give rise to our experiences. And so, of course, we have ignorance of karma in our world. we wouldn't be bombing countries if we thought of karma, right? Because as you bomb those countries, you're creating the karma to be bombed yourself. I mean, not necessarily in right now. I'm not talking about this moment. Karma often takes many, many, lifetimes for it to mature and to become, the result that we are going to experience on the basis of that action. But most beings don't live their lives with an awareness of karma, and they just go about stepping in things all the time, and literally and figuratively, and in the end create their own suffering through that as well. So again, there are different forms of ignorance. So when you are breathing out that ignorance in the last of these three breaths, just you can breathe out anything, any unknowing, any unawareness. And the Buddha's teachings are very much in the wisdom vein, most of them giving us something to actually appreciate that we didn't know before. The Buddha's observations in this very first teaching on the Four Noble Truths are in that vein, to really understand how we're not quite aware of the nature of existence in that way. So, okay, the second thing I want to do, we'll do a little bit of meditation on this. We're running out of time to some degree, but I want to just do a brief meditation on this technique of kind of seeing our thoughts as just passing through our minds. So the previous one was just maybe that first line. We can just try to get grounded in the breath, rooted in the breath, and use this nine round breathing meditation to kind of let go of some of those thoughts. Because it's interesting, the Buddha says that all of these things we're letting go of, our anger, our attachment, our ignorance, and all of the other things that stem from those, they're all thoughts, actually. A lot of people don't think that anger is a thought. It feels like this thing that comes up in you and suddenly you're spitting out all kinds of, horrible words and doing things to people. That's not, you know, quite accurate. It has become so commonplace that that's how it feels. But there's actually a thought underneath anger, underneath, attachment and what have you. So what we're doing here in this meditation, it's often called the mind like the sky, is we're going to see our thoughts as they come through. Because in Buddhism, while ideally it's good to get rid of our thoughts and to have a non-conceptual awareness, that's part of the process too. But we're going to have thoughts no matter what, right? And their thoughts are going to pass through our minds. You see this all the time when you meditate, right? You sit down to meditate and suddenly you're thinking about something somebody said to you earlier today and you start ruminating about that and what have you. This is the nature of our minds, right? So as those thoughts come through, what we're trying to do here is see them as simply like clouds passing through the sky, not getting too caught up in them, not getting all tangled up in them, but rather just simply letting them go, letting them sort of pass through. They lose their energy eventually. You're not thinking about some of the things you thought about earlier today with such passion, right? You were totally caught up in them for a while and they were entertaining your mind, maybe not that entertaining, but they were engaging your mind certainly. And now they're gone, right? That's the nature of our thoughts as well. They're impermanent, they're fleeting. So again, in this meditation, I'll just guide you through it. I don't need to say much more, but we're just going to kind of spend a few minutes in silence, and then we're going to begin to work with seeing our minds as like the sky. And all these thoughts, whatever thoughts you have going on right now for you that simply arise, to just simply treat them like clouds in the sky and let them dissipate, all right? So let's do this, and then we'll see if there are any questions on this. So again, I'll ring the bowl here, and we'll start with just a few minutes of breathing meditation. Again, you can focus on that point towards the kind of tip of the nose, and then we'll go through this guided meditation. So before we do this meditation, it might be useful to bring to mind the image of the sky and the clouds that pass through it. If we think about the sky, it has those qualities of spaciousness and clarity. And the sun generally is shining through the sky. Or when clouds appear, they might obscure the sunlight, but they don't change the clarity and spaciousness of the sky. That is the space in which the clouds simply come and go. They arise and they pass. So now focus on the mind, this awareness that we have, our consciousness, this space of experience. And as you see various thoughts coming into your mind, could be thoughts of anger or attachment, or could just be thoughts of remembering, recollecting. Rather than getting caught up in those, kind of following them, getting attached to them, just simply treat them like clouds in the sky, holding your awareness of the clarity, the spaciousness in which those thoughts are arising. Let them arise and let them pass. Each thought, each mental event, just like a cloud, and your mind, just like the sky. So do a few minutes in silence of just being with the spaciousness, the clarity of the mind as these thoughts simply arise and pass, just like clouds. So at times, these cloud-like thoughts appear, and we have that impulse to engage in them, to follow them, and recognize you have a choice. You can move your awareness to the sky-like mind, Just be aware of that vast, spacious clarity in which the thoughts are arising. And then let go of this technique, this meditation, and just simply return to the breath. And just take note of what's going on in your mind, your body, as you attend to the breath. You can open your eyes gradually and come back into this space. Just take a moment. So, any observations or questions, comments on that meditation or anything else we've done tonight? Yes, Asha. Mhm. Mhm. Okay. Okay. Right. Yeah. 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 Mhm. Oh, okay. Hmm. Yeah. For those online, Asha's asking about kind of what to visualize because she finds this a little difficult and tends to be more trapped in the space of her head in terms of the visualization of the clouds and what have you. I don't know. I find I'm visualizing a pretty big panorama, maybe not completely huge, but it's something pretty vast. It doesn't hurt probably to imagine. I think actually there are some meditations where they do this kind of imagining that you're sort of on a nice hilltop somewhere and you when you're doing that kind of thinking about the clouds and the sky and whatever, you're taking in a huge vista, right, of like everything around you. And so then when that gets translated into working with the mind, you already have an idea of it being much more spacious. I probably should have said something like that at the beginning just to give you a kind of the ability to move into that. But so try that. I mean, because then when we have that, because we've all been in some position like that, maybe we haven't gone to Mount Everest or something. I don't even know if it's that clear up in Mount Everest. It probably isn't. But, but some peak that we've been on, mountaintop that we've been on, where we've been above everything else, and there's this huge amount of sky. New Mexico and the Southwest, we often talk about it being kind of big sky country because you get a lot of those sorts of experiences of vastness of sky. Um, but yeah, use that first as a visualization to think of the sky and the clouds, and then keep your mind kind of that big in terms of the thoughts kind of arising within it. I mean, this whole idea of kind of our brains are certainly involved in this human life, right? Because that's where all of the processing is going and what have you. So there is some truth to the fact that it seems like things are coming from here. As you mentioned, Asha, in Tibetan Buddhism, of course, in the tantric teachings, again, that the 9 round breathing meditation works with to some degree. We see the heart center as being the seat of our consciousness. So if you ask a Tibetan, where's your mind? They'll often point here. And we don't have that kind of sensation, I think, of our consciousness awareness residing in that point. They say it's essentially a place where the left and right channels go around the central channel and create this knot. That's the, the thickest knot we have. They wrap around 3 times at the heart chakra. And that's actually where the seat of our most subtle consciousness resides. So it's not a level of consciousness we're normally aware of. That subtle consciousness is there at the thread of all of our experiences of consciousness, but it's sort of the the final thing we come down to, and that's actually is what happens at death. They say is that you access that very subtle mind, what we call the clear light mind. So you're right. I mean, this is where people normally think, but that could be seem even more confining in some ways if we're just right inside this little space in our heart chakra and experiencing it there. So consciousness should feel very vast and very spacious. It should, yeah, try to encompass that idea of all the various things that are arising from wherever they arise. Don't really have a location they arise. They are just arising in the space of that. Try that. Yeah. Hmm. Any other questions or comments? Yes, please. Okay. Right. What's your name? Brandon. Brandon has the question about what does it mean to get caught up in our thoughts as opposed to allowing them to simply pass through. Well, again, it's the tendency that we have to really kind of become interested in those. And interest can not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily mean something delightful and enjoyable because we get interested in, for example, thoughts of anger and patterns that we like to entertain in some way because we are upset at what somebody's done to us or whatever. So getting caught up in your thoughts to me is like when we are allowing those thoughts to kind of take us in the direction that they normally do. Sometimes I use the analogy of like a train, right? If you're sitting at a train station, and we've got a lot of nice little Caltrain and all these, nice little trains, BART and what have you. If you're just sitting at the station and the train comes in and it stops and then it takes off, well, that's kind of like what we want to do is just let the thought go, because we know where it goes. We've been on that train before. We've done that train many, many times. Um, but when we get on the train, that's when we get caught up in it, right? And then we just follow it and we continue going on it until we decide, oh, I'm on the train again, and then we get off, right? But the idea is that getting caught up in means that we are allowing that thought to take us to those places of deeper anger, deeper resentment, deeper jealousy, deeper attachment, desire, what have you. These things that can be, problematic. Whereas if we just sit as an observer and allow that to come through, it pulls up and it takes off, well, then we don't go to those places. So getting caught up in it, in my estimation, means that. It's like, I'm going to actually let that thought take me where it normally goes. And again, it's places we've always been. There's nothing new under the sun, really. I mean, it's always a place we've been before, a place that's not so beneficial for us. And so we have a choice. Like I was saying towards that one part of the guided meditation, we have to recognize that when those things appear, there's that impulse, that, that, I like that thought. I want to go with that thought or whatever. And we have to say, I've got a choice. I can sit and simply let it sort of dissipate. And maybe another thought will come on and we let that one dissipate and they just kind of pass by. Does that make some sense? Or was your another aim to your question, perhaps, Brandon? Uh-huh. Hmm. Mhm. There is that to be said for it. Initially, it's kind of like, I'm not going to go there because, I'm trying to maintain the calm and the focus. Hopefully, over time, we find the calm and the focus to be much more satisfying than getting on the train. That's why, again, in Buddhism, we do a lot of study of kind of the nature of these delusions and what we call afflictions, delusions, the states of mind that are not taking us to healthy places. On Thursday nights right now, I'm doing a course for the folks up in Taos, north of Santa Fe, that's called Getting to Know Your Mind. And it's all about Venerable Rabina, a wonderful Australian nun in our tradition. She uses the idea of like, these are your crazy roommates. These are all the things that are hanging out with you, and you need to kind of know who they are. So you don't keep getting on the train with them. You don't keep going to those places. So giving them energy, that's another idea that's useful. Is like we're not going to kind of get on get on board that and really put all of our kind of mind and attention on that. Instead, we're going to want to reside in a place where we can simply see them passing through and understand that, again, there's no benefit to getting on that train and following them. It's just wasted energy in a sense. And not just that it's just wasted energy, it also is going to take us places where we're going to create some harmful imprints in our mind that are going to ripen into some sort of undesirable things. One of the effects of are these mental states like anger and what have you is that we plant seeds for them to recur. This is how they use the analogy of a seed. We're really just talking about kind of a mental energy that we create every time we go on that train of anger. That train of anger, again, is going to just get more and more prominent in our minds. People who say, I'm a very angry person, simply just have a lot of trains of anger coming into their station and they just keep getting on them and they, eventually get off of them when something changes, but then they're back on them again, right? Because they have that habit. They give it attention, they give it energy. So this is a kind of a second technique. The first one, thank you for that question, Brandon. Yeah. This is kind of a second technique. The first one, again, just simply trying to get anchored in the breath and the awareness of the breath through the 9-round breathing or simply attending to the breath. And that may be good for maybe milder things. This one might be when things are a little bit stronger, right? When you've got those actual thoughts that keep knocking at the door, they keep pulling into your station and there's a temptation, the impulse to get on them. But you have to have some way of pulling back. This is working with the mind in this way of seeing the clarity and spaciousness of it is a very powerful technique. In fact, in some forms of Buddhism, they use this technique of Mahamudra. Mahamudra is a meditation where initially you pull back into that kind of conventional awareness of the mind as simply a space in which all this stuff is happening. But then you also even get into the deeper nature of the mind, the emptiness of the mind. And that's a kind of a really profound way to experience some detachment from all of these delusions and afflicted states of mind. We're not going to do that in the last meditation, though. That's a little heavy duty. Um, what I want to introduce you to in this last part is where we move more into a bit of analytical meditation. Analytical meditation is really at the heart of so much of our changing our minds. You need the tool of focusing the mind and getting the mind to be kind of spacious and aware, but you need to introduce into it the thoughts that will actually help us to remove the negative tendencies and replace them with much more positive states of mind. This is kind of based on this idea of antidotes. All of these delusions, these states of mind, they can be antidoted. You can find something that is directly in opposition to them. So that rather than in response to, or maybe in reacting to, a certain stimulus coming into our lives, such as somebody yelling at us or saying something rude to us, we're going to change the thoughts we have at that time. Instead of having the thought of anger, we'll have the thought of compassion, for example. Okay, so that's what I think we'll work with in this last little bit. We'll do about a 10-minute meditation, and then we'll have time for just a little bit of questions after that. So let's just reconnect with the breath. I was going to have you do the 9-round breathing meditation again, but I think we'll just do, again, a couple minutes of focusing on the breath. You can bring your awareness once more to that area around the nostrils, the tip of the nose, and just kind of bring it there with that idea of the spaciousness of the mind and simply attending to that point and letting thoughts, distractions sort of pass through. I'll ring the bowl to begin this, and then in just a few minutes, I'll lead you in this meditation working with these antidotal thoughts. So, to do this meditation, I want you to recall an incident sometime in the recent past, maybe even earlier today, if it occurred today, something where someone angered you. So, we're talking about a person here, not getting upset or angry at a phone or a computer, but rather a person who said something or did something that you took offense at. No doubt you did have some level of anger, irritation, annoyance, some rising up of that kind of energy. And just take a moment to identify an experience that you're comfortable in working with. If you're having difficulty finding one in terms of a personal situation, you can think about somebody in the world now who perhaps is angering or upsetting you, the actions they're engaged in, the things they say or do. That's also a possibility to work with. But again, just identify something you're comfortable working with. And as you experience the sort of anger or aversion energy that you have towards that person on the basis of what they did or said, think about how that's a thought. It's a way of looking at them and reacting to them. What's the basis of that thought? Well, first, there was simply something that you experienced as unpleasant. We call this a feeling, just like the feeling of happiness or pleasantness. You have here the feeling of unpleasantness, unhappiness. And on the basis of that, you have all kinds of thoughts about that being, making them into someone truly negative. Like every part of them is something you're opposed to, that you feel is bad, unworthy. And on the basis of that, this mind of anger is arising, wanting to push that being out of your experience, maybe even harm them. And it's happening very quickly. But it's a process of thought in reaction to that feeling that we have of unpleasantness. And just spend a minute or so sort of picking it apart yourself. Can you see that there's that underlying thought of the undesirability of that person? You think 100% that is who they are, just a despicable, awful, horrible person for doing what they did. And maybe not that kind of language, but something unfavorable, definitely. And you're believing in that at that time and having the mind of anger arise. And because this is a thought, we can choose to have a different thought. We have to become familiar with a more positive thought. But there's the thought of compassion and love for this being. And let's formulate what we do on the basis of those sorts of thoughts. So we have the same experience. They say something or do something unpleasant. That's the feeling we have, just simply a feeling, an unpleasantness. But what's the story we're going to tell ourselves about that? Let's entertain a new story. Instead of making them despicable, let's recognize that they are a suffering being. They are a being who has that root of ignorance we spoke of earlier, who is grasping at their own selves, existing in this very concrete, solid way, and reacting to things in the same way that we often react. Reacting out of that ignorance, wanting to find some measure of happiness, but being very misguided in how they're going about doing that. As you think about the situation of that being and how they're creating their own misery through these delusions in their mind that are the real enemy, the real problem, start to generate thoughts of compassion, wanting them to be free of that, to not experience that confusion, to not experience their own delusions, their attachment, their anger, and so on, and to be free of all suffering, all dissatisfaction. Just entertain that thought of compassion as you think about that being through that lens, through those ideas. You can accompany this thought of compassion with the thought of love that wants this being to be happy, to find true peace and happiness. If they had that, they wouldn't be doing what they're doing. They would be an improved version of themselves. Try to generate thoughts of wishing this being to have happiness and everything that leads to happiness. Fill your heart with love and compassion for them in this way. And then let go of this practice and once more return to the breath and take note again of your body, your mind. Just do an assessment of where you're at from this meditation as well as just being here this evening. And again, open your eyes gradually and come back into the space together. So I'm going to tell one little quote from a wonderful Lama that was actually one of His Holiness the Dalai Lama's teachers, Kunu Lama Rinpoche, who taught him this wonderful text, Shantideva's text, The Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. Kunu Lama Rinpoche said, "It's this simple. Everyone you meet has either realized reality or they haven't." So what we were talking about in regard to Chris's question. Either that person has realized reality, and then Kunu Lama Rinpoche says, if they have, then we should be like bowing at their feet, right? Because they've realized this really profound truth. They've developed their minds to that degree. So that's the one option. That person you meet has done that. They should be an object of veneration. Or two, they're a being who hasn't realized reality. And therefore, they're only an object of compassion because they're under the control of this deluded state of mind and engaging in all these actions, and bombing countries and doing whatever, in our world, because they are not in touch with reality. They are doing it out of a mistaken idea and ignorance. And therefore, they are only objects of compassion and never a valid object of anger. because, again, the enemy is the delusions. The enemy are the afflictions, the ignorance, not the person. The person's under the control of all of that. And the person can be free of all of that. So anyway, I thought I'd share that quote. I always get inspired when I hear that quote. But anything anyone wants to share from tonight, or a question you need to ask before we conclude? Anything? So again, just to review, we had 3 techniques, and hopefully, again, you can find probably information. I'm sure the center here also has perhaps, files they can give you of the 9-round breathing meditation. It is written up, but essentially that's one technique, and then simply attending to the breath as well. Bringing the mind to the breath is a very important way to just calm the mind some. But if it's really strong stuff going on, then maybe we have to go to the next step, which is the mind like the sky, and really see the thoughts as simply passing through, and just try that, not go with that impulse, not get caught up in them, as Brandon was, referring to in his question. The third step is to really develop an antidotal mind. And again, these are 3 techniques that we can use can use at any time in our day, right? Get on the train or something and somebody's, jostling you by being rude and talking on the phone and not paying attention to what they're doing. Instead of getting angry and pushing them back or something, think about them through the lens of compassion. They're just a suffering being. Is it really worth our energy to get on that train of anger and go there when we could have compassion instead and improve the quality of our own minds and be more responsive to others? Okay, so let's have some thoughts of kind of closing off our time together. Call this dedication. The idea is that we want to take all the positive energy we've created tonight and sort of seal it in a way. We had good thoughts at the beginning of tonight, wanting to be here, to find peace and calm in our own minds and hearts so we could then bring that to others. So now we dedicate for accomplishment of that, finding our own deepest peace so we can then help others to attain the same thing. And while we're here together, let's make strong prayers also for the good health and long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and all of our spiritual guides and teachers who are helping us on this path of discovery, helping us to find true peace. May they continue to abide in this world with good health, long lives, and continue to be of incredible benefit through sharing the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha with us. Okay. Thank you all. It's a nice thing about a rotating chair. I can just go like that. Anyway, I'm glad you were all here. So.